Greetings, all you heretics and veterans of the Long War. My name is Satyr and one of my favorite parts of 40k is actually role-playing, specifically the myriad of tabletop role-playing games released by Fantasy Flight Games. No, I've never played Wrath and Glory, though I've watched a bit of Warhams. My favorite Warhammer role-playing game, the one I've played the most, and the one I think shines above all the rest, is Black Crusade. The premise of Black Crusade is simple. All of the other Warhammer 40k RPGs released by Fantasy Flight had centered around making Imperial characters, except arguably Rogue Trader, which had supplements released which gave you rules to play as a few Xenos races. So instead, this time they made an RPG that gave you rules for playing as the only actually interesting human faction in the entire setting, Chaos Worshippers. That's what we call hyperbole. Please don't get your basilisk in a twist. However, this setup added a whole new dichotomy that didn't previously exist in the other 40k RPGs, because now it's much more likely that a Space Marine will end up in the same party as a regular human. The incredibly powerful starting gear that Astartes get, along with their myriad of archetypes built around combat, has given a lot of people the impression that humans just cannot match up with the Astartes in combat in Black Crusade, that combat-focused mortal builds will always be overshadowed by their Space Marine counterparts. I, personally, disagree, and I have the math to prove it! So in this first episode of this new series, which I cannot come up with a name for, we'll be diving into the topic of how to best make a mortal character in Black Crusade, and how you can make them go toe-to-toe with their Astartes comrades. Before we get into the math proper, I gotta define some terms. Throughout this video, I'll be using the acronyms GEQ, MEQ, TEQ, and KEQ. These acronyms are used to describe something of an equivalent amount of tankiness. They are, respectively, Guardsman equivalent, Marine equivalent, Terminator equivalent, and Knight equivalent. Because of the way damage and soak works, tankiness often comes more in the form of damage mitigation than just having a higher number of wounds. So if you shoot a bolt pistol at a Guardsman, it'll do more damage than if you shoot it at a Marine. The math on the average amount of damage you do greatly changes based on what you're attacking, so this is a very important concept to understand. For the purposes of this video, you really only need to understand the first two, Guardsman equivalent and Marine equivalent, because this guide assumes your character is fresh out of character creation. Guardsman equivalents have a soak of 7 and 10 wounds, and Marine equivalents have a soak of 16 and 20 wounds. The reason why the math changes so much is because of soak, which is easily the more important of the two stats. Soak is the amount of damage you reduce whenever you're attacked, with pen being the style weapons that reduces the soak of a target. As a quick and dirty example of this, let's say you fire a bolter at a GEQ. GEQs have a soak of 7. You shoot on the semi-automatic profile and so only get one hit. Let's look at the damage profile of the bolter. 1d10 plus 5, pen 4 with the tearing special rule. Tearing means you roll an extra d10 when rolling damage and take the higher result. So we roll 2d10 and we get 8. Nice. 8 plus 5 is 13 with pen 4. So because of the bolter's pen value, we reduce the GEQ soak of 7 down to 3, which means the GEQ receives 10 damage and is thus reduced to 0 wounds and dies. But if we take the same roll and apply it to a Marine equivalent, with a soak of 16, the 4 pen only reduces their soak to 12, which means they only take 1 damage from the attack. See what I mean when I say the soak value of a unit drastically changes the math we're working with here? That's why it's valuable to have baselines to measure our math against. Furthermore, Black Crusade is what is known as a percentile system game, meaning all rolls are done by trying to roll at or below a target number which represents your percentage of success on D100, or 2d10s. So when I say something is TNX, the X is the percent chance to hit. If I say someone has a TN70 ballistic skill, that means they have a 70% chance to hit with ranged weapons. That is about all you need to know to understand the contents of this video. Everything else will be explained as it comes up. I think with any character creation process, you need to start with a mindset. What are you trying to create? a combat-focused character, a stealth-focused character, ranged, melee, psyker spells. This is even more so in Black Crusade because it is what you would call a classless RPG. You choose a character archetype which gives you a few abilities and starting gear, but then the rest is up to you to spend XP on things as you wish. This means there's a much greater room to accidentally create a bad character if you don't know what you're doing than in something like, say, D&D, where character creation mostly amounts to filling out a largely predetermined spreadsheet of abilities. So with that being said, you need to start with a mindset. For the purposes of this video, we'll mostly be covering the content found within the core rulebook of the game, not only because factoring in all the things that were added to the game through the supplements would balloon this video to ungodly lengths, and at that point I'd rather just make a wholly separate video on them, but also, as we'll be covering later, arguably the most powerful mortal archetype lies within the core rulebook. So what are the archetypes available to mortal characters in the core rulebook? Well, there's 4. The Apostate, the Heretic, the Renegade, and the Psyker. And each one fills the idea of a different mindset. The Apostate is an all-round face who's able to manipulate people and spread the word of chaos. They're priests and clerics of the ruinous powers. They get +5 fellowship and the options of the skills shown on screen. Their ability is that once per session they can make a test, and if successful they gain the peer feature with an organization of their choice for the remainder of the session. Personally, I think this is incredibly underwhelming. Being able to gain the peer feat with an organization for a single session is pretty useless when taken on the face of it. I mean, just imagine infiltrating with this ability. You gain peer Imperial Guard to infiltrate a military base. 9 PM comes around, oops, session's over. Next week you all gather together and bam, you no longer have peer Imperial Guard, and they suddenly realize the guy dressed like this isn't exactly their friend. The ability to deceive Imperial forces into thinking you're one of them is incredibly useful, but at a certain point the limitation imposed upon it by its time limit makes it sort of lacking, especially when it could be replicated with a stolen uniform and a high fellowship, something that an apostate should have anyway. Hope you can achieve your infiltration mission within the span of a single session, because otherwise, this archetype is basically useless. Next up is the Heretic, one of the most flexible archetypes available in the game. The ability to get proficiency in bolt weapons, as well as weapon mechadendrites and cybernetics, and you have an archetype that can do just about anything combat-related, with lots of utility to boot from their starting skills and access to utility mechadendrites. Repairing and modifying armor and weapons, operating complex machinery, technical knock. Overall, this is an amazing archetype, with the tools to handle just about any situation. Of course, there is the Psyker archetype. Psykers start with the Psyker trait, a psi rating of 3, and 1d5 corruption points. However, at least in my opinion, Psykers as they are in the cool rulebook are very weak and lacking in a lot of options, except for one very incredibly good option, which is force weapons. Force weapons are incredibly deadly, as they add the Psyker's psi rating to their damage and pen, which can very quickly make a sword that can cut through Terminators like butter. Let's say you have a Force sword and a psi rating of 3, the same psi rating human Psykers start with. Force swords are 1d10 plus 2 plus strength bonus and pen 2, which then change to 1d10 plus 5 plus strength bonus and pen 5 with the Force special rule. With a strength of 25, which is base human strength, you're doing an average of 13 damage with pen 5, or 1 to 2 damage against the Space Marine equivalent, and that's just with the lowest strength a human can possibly have. Imagine if you had strength 50 and a psi rating of 5. Suddenly you're doing 1d10 plus 7 plus 5 with pen 7, or an average of 17 to 18 damage with pen 7, or 8 to 9 damage against a Space Marine equivalent. However, this is a situation where humans just can't match up with Space Marines. Sorcerers start with 2 psi rating and a force weapon of their choice. So take a Staff of Change, which is 1d10 plus 5 plus strength bonus with pen 5, and with the lowest possible Astartes strength of 30, you're doing 1d10 plus 7 plus 3 with pen 7. A nearly identical stat line without having to spend any of the XP it'd take to get a psi rating of 5, and before stats are even generated. With all this in mind, there's really no reason not to just pick Space Marine and choose the Sorcerer archetype if you really want to play Psyker, because really the actual spellcasting of Psykers is a tad underwhelming without any of the Psyker archetypes added in the splat books. Mortal Psykers don't even have a Force weapon as part of their starting gear. They need to spend requisitions to get one. And that should be all you really need to hear. Then there is the Holy Grail, the single most amazing archetype mortals have access to. Actually, no. This archetype demands its own section of the video.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
The Renegade archetype is arguably the single most powerful archetype available to humans in Black Crusade, and the reason why comes down to their special ability and starting gear. Their special ability is called Adroit. It lets you choose one of your stats and permanently add 1 degree of success to every test you make with that stat. This, in all reality, can be used to make any character of any build due to how general and applicable it is, but I think it especially shines on melee characters, for reasons I'll go into later. The starting gear option is also probably best of any of the other mortal archetypes. Just out the gate, you can get a bolt gun, bolt pistol, and a power mace, but the true power in the Renegade starting gear comes from what they can turn that starting gear into through trading. Trade in one of your requisitions and that bolt gun, and you can get a pair of lightning claws. Lightning claws are very special and they add a point of damage per degree of success on the hit roll, with it being increased to 2 points of damage per degree of success if they're used as a pair. So if you put weapon skill as your adroit characteristic, then suddenly you're getting an extra 4 damage guaranteed. And they already do 1d10 plus 6 plus strength bonus, with pen 8. 8 fucking pen! Want to see what that means? Within character creation, you can very easily get a weapon skill of 75. The average roll of a D100 is 50 or 51. With 75 weapon skill, that's 2 degrees of success on average, plus 1 from succeeding, plus 1 from adroit, 4 degrees of success. And these lightning claws get an extra 2 damage for each degree of success. So now you're adding an extra 8 goddamn damage, meaning you're doing 1d10 plus 6 plus strength bonus plus fucking 8 damage! And we haven't spent XP yet! Ooh, humans can't be melee built in Black Crusade. Bitch, I am one-shotting Space Marines before we've even spent XP! Holy shit! I have gotten some tea. I am calm. You see what I mean when I say that the Renegade archetype really shines on melee characters? I didn't even talk about the lightning attack talent yet. Basically, you incur a -10 penalty to the roll, but get an extra attack for every degree of success. So if you slap lightning attack on that character, suddenly not only are you getting 1d10 plus 6 plus strength bonus plus 8 damage, assuming you've raised your weapon skill stat over time in order to keep the average degrees of success to 4, which would really mean just getting an extra 10 weapon skill, which you can pretty easily get within character creation, and suddenly you're also rolling that 4 times. This is something that Space Marines can also do, but Adroit means that the 6 extra damage in melee Space Marines have by default over mortals hurts a lot less, if not nullified completely. That's not to say Renegades are only good as melee characters. Adroit is easily the most widely applicable special ability of any of the mortal archetypes. It just has the most impact on melee characters. Let's say you make a ranged character. Well, with a ranged weapon's burst fire profile, you do an extra 1 attack per 2 degrees of success, up to the maximum listed by the weapon's stat line. With an automatic 1 extra degree of success on top of the regular bonus degree of success you get for succeeding a test, that means you essentially raise the average number of hits you get on the burst fire profile by 1 across the board, which does a lot more than you might think. If you burst fire a Reaper autocannon with a ballistic skill of 75, then you're only getting an average of 1 shot, which does an average of 25 to 26 damage with Pen 6. With a droid, you're getting an average of 2 shots, meaning you're doing an extra 25 to 26 damage with Pen 6, essentially doubling your average damage just because of a droid. A droid makes Renegades incredibly good at specializing at a single thing, regardless of what that thing is, because it also applies to any and all skill rolls. If you make Fellowship your Adroit stat, suddenly you're getting an extra degree of success on every Charm roll, every Deceive roll. Want to play a Rogue, a sneaky sneak sort of character? Put Agility as your Adroit stat, suddenly you always get an extra degree of success on Stealth, Sleight of Hand, and Acrobatics rolls. No matter what mindset you take to your character, you can make a Renegade that does that job really well. And that, I think, is the main difference between Space Marines and Mortals. It could be assumed through this video that the hot take I'm going to end on is that Mortal characters are actually significantly stronger than Space Marine characters in Black Crusade. But that's also not correct. There really isn't a definitive better choice. Mortal characters in general are very good at specializing in a singular task, but Space Marines get some incredibly strong gear that makes them able to specialize at many things. Space Marines have Unnatural Strength 4 and Power Armor which increases their strength by 30, which means out the gate a Space Marine is already an incredibly proficient melee fighter before spending any XP or doing any stat generation, which allows them to focus more of their XP on ranged combat to make themselves a warrior highly adept at all ranges. They also have really good starting gear, which can be traded up for even better gear, since all their archetypes start with Legion weapons. They can dual wield more effectively with Ambidextrous, where Renegades and other Mortals are very good at specializing into a singular role and doing that really effectively. But Space Marines can much more effectively become a Swiss Army knife of death, but that's for its own video. With all that being said, don't underestimate mortal characters. They are equally as capable and deadly as their Astartes comrades, so long as you have the right mindset. Thank you for watching this video, like if you liked it, subscribe to get notified when more videos come out. I'm shooting for 3 videos every month, so if you want to give me even greater motivation to reach my goal, feel free to leave $1 on Patreon and join such lovely people as Cassie Fox, Henry Michelle, Paul Camagliano, Randon Pearson, Shopping Cart, Jamie Harris, and Serena J. Fleming, as well as my $15 patron, Lucifer King, on our patron-exclusive Discord server. Have a wonderful day.
And may you find glory in Slaaneish's name.